Hello and welcome to another Stellarian Games video. In this episode, we're going to be looking at how to make a portal rift. This is meant to be a rip in the fabric of, I guess, space and time into another dimension. Meant to be looking like it's just bursting out of the ground. So I have these boulders kind of rimming it as if it's just got torn open and a portal is left inside. As you can see, the inside of it has a little bit of a ring of lights that's just powered with a small fairy light controller here, and gives a nice way of putting something onto the ground, and really any location. It's just kind of surrounded by a gravel location, but you can put it into a forest, you put it into a cave, anything you wanted to. This will work pretty nicely. One of the big things that I played with in this is sort of the object source lighting, trying to make the portal light up. Not the best on the portal itself. It's a little bit dark in the portal, but on the rocks itself, I think the lighting turned out pretty nicely. So, fun little project, and let's go to the table and see how this one is done. Okay, for this project, we're going to use that chunk of small MDF. You can see that that's just a shelf from a sorter, but I wanted to start with that size, so I carved that off on this piece of XPS, and then use that as kind of my starting dimension, and then just using an alpha knife to cut it down to kind of the rough shape that I wanted for this portal. This will be a taper to show that it's kind of erupting out of the ground, but it also gives it a little bit of height so that we have something to work with. Now using the knife to cut in the actual portal interior, just popping that free. And then on the underside, I'm doing a counter bevel so that I'd have, it would look like it's more open to kind of the extra planar dimension. I ended up deciding to cut in a battery section as well for some lights. So I'm just cutting out slightly into it and then using the knife to cut in just about 1/4 inch to form the cavity for the batteries. I'm tracing that shape out onto that MDF and the inside as well, just so that I have the cutout where the battery recess needs to be. Taking this to the bandsaw and cutting out the outer perimeter. Drilling a hole in for the corners of that battery component, the little hole for the battery. And then using a jigsaw to cut the straights on that interior. Now on the sander, I'm beveling the outer edge just so that it again has a nice smooth exterior. As you can see, I also cut that inner bevel a little bit more square to make sure that I'd have enough room for the lights that I wanted to add in. I'm pre-painting this black so that I didn't have to worry about it once I had some of the other stuff glued in. I'm starting to form the little boulders and rocks that are going to be sticking up out of the opening of this portal. These are just going to be cut out of XPS and just shaped into kind of spiky boulders of various different sizes, just taking lots of little chunks and making all the little different boulders. It's a fairly tedious process, but you can get into a rhythm of it. Now using hot glue to glue in all of those different boulders, forming kind of a jagged, crushed open look to this opening. Now using white glue, coating the entire outside to form a little bit more texture on it, just brushing that all over the exterior surface, making sure I don't get it onto the boulders themselves. and then coating that glue in some fine sand. I'm going to finish painting black, painting the inside of the boulders, making sure that all of the different surfaces are covered. Those are a little bit tricky. And I'm painting all of the boulders first so that my brush wasn't picking up any of the sand, and then leaving it on the boulders so that they'd still have a nice smooth texture. I spray painted the actual MDF section, and then I'm going to paint in the actual portal. So this is just some nice green acrylic paint, starting with a dark green and then working my way up to a much more brilliant green and almost a yellow color. Now I'm starting with a dark brown over all of the different surfaces of the outside and building up a sand color to kind of mimic that sandy look. The boulders themselves have a little bit of tan, but then ended up with some gray as well to simulate the kind of stone texture. I'm coming with some green and hitting the underside of all of the boulders to give it some kind of object source lighting coming up from the portals. So hitting the edges of those boulders with that green really is a nice touch that gives it a cool look. Gluing in the battery pack and then starting to work my way around with these fairy lights and gluing them into place, holding them, gluing, holding, and then wrapping that wire around and around until all of them are in place. I've got the MDF ready to go into place, just using some hot glue, putting that onto the portal itself, and then placing that over the top. Holding that down so that it will stay in place. With the lights on, it ends up with a pretty cool effect. It's not quite what I was looking for, but it's still a pretty awesome feature for the tabletop. All right, so here's the finished product. This one was a fun little project. I like making these things with the boulders. They have a really cool feel and look to them. So I hope you like this video. If you do, please hit the like button and subscribe, and we'll see you again next time. Thank you.